Okay, we have a good group today. Will and Briston are returnees, as is Thomas and myself. We're just everyone else is coming on for the first time, and we have a group of 9 people. Come on, we get a better view here. Are we up to nine? Waiting room 1, Miss Admit. Now we're up to 11. We may all have to go out and get bigger screens. Okay. For those of you that are here the first time, we're a fairly informal group. And we're also friendly with each other at the end of our discussions. And sometimes they do get involved. And so, you know, feel free to say whatever you feel needs to be said, because the goal of this is not necessarily to make everybody happy, but to provide good information that makes us think. So anyway, and who did I have a conversation with on the phone yesterday? Lisa, right? Okay, so we had a conversation, and so I added a third topic, a third subtopic, which we will I know inevitably get to. And if there's something else, we're going to start out with teaching a female self-defense class. Although I don't know what the correct term is to use anymore, the female, woman's self-defense, lady self-defense, or just plain self-defense. Because I know there, it's just saying a self-defense class is not necessarily the most, I don't know, how do you say it? It's not the most effective way of putting it any longer. So, and I'm very glad that we have Wilinar and Lisa and who else? Diane with us this morning. Jodi as well. There's a possibility of a 5th lady joining us, which is absolutely fine. And who's here? That's Cliff is his first time. That's okay. We have people that just pop in and join, so it's not a restricted group. Most of the time, everyone's instructors. Sometimes not. Sometimes it's all jujitsu instructors, and other times it's a good mix from different martial arts. And that always gives us, I think, a healthier perspective on things. So, for those of you who are familiar with the term la boca, enough of la boca, that's Spanish for the mouth. It's self-reference. We're starting out with a basic question. Is there a difference between self-defense instruction and martial arts instruction? Anyone? I mean, just someone? I could say something, but I'd just soon have everybody else say something.
Sensei Kirby?
Yes.
I'm going to get off the Zoom meeting right now because Sensei Albright is not receiving the link. I'm just going to get back to her, then get back to the Zoom meeting, if you don't mind.
Fine.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Is there a difference between self-defense instruction and martial arts instruction?
Yes, there's definitely a difference.
Okay, nodding head. What are the? And I'm not going to ask why, because I learned a long time as a teacher when I worked in the counseling office. You never ask a student why they did something, because it automatically puts them on the defensive. You ask, what were your reasons? And you're more likely to get some legitimate reasons off the person than asking them, why did you do this? It makes, so my question, some of you are nodding your head, yes, there is a difference. So my next question is, what are the differences?
I can expand a little bit if you'd like. To me, all self-defense involves martial arts, but not all martial arts involve self-defense. There are some things we do just for art, just because it looks good in a demo. Some things we do because it fits a certain set of rules for competition. And I think self-defense has no rules, and your goal is to go home safely, whatever that takes.
Okay. And I think you've made a very important distinction in that in self-defense there are no rules, which is the biggest challenge. Okay, anything else? Yes.
Well, I think if there are any rules in self-defense, it would be, to follow certain steps to avoid a conflict. So we might want to, follow the rule of avoidance first, and then de-escalation, and then when it comes down to it, apply the physical aspects of self-defense.
Okay. You don't have to raise your hand, just speak up. We're all very polite here.
I think maybe one other difference is that a martial art tends to be a road where you're not really aware of an end to that road. You're just on that road. And self-defense, okay, I want to get to where I can walk home safely. I'm not intending to spend every afternoon for the rest of my life doing self-defense. So I think there's a perspective of a shorter term goal for self-defense. But in terms of the participants.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that perspective. Okay, anything else?
I think we ought to hear from the female instructors.
The what?
I'd like to hear from the female instructors.
Yes.
Well, I can speak to this, having started to try to teach self-defense classes while I was in college as a brown belt at Northwestern. I walked in just figuring I would just teach straight techniques, and learned very quickly that the way I was going to connect mostly with women was to modify and work on other skills such as de-escalation and situational awareness and all those sorts of things. So I came in very naive, thinking I was just going to teach straight physical techniques, and that didn't connect with the women that I had begun teaching. So I needed to modify that. And then I learned I needed to modify the actual techniques because I had to distill it down to what I could teach somebody in a relatively short period of time that would be effective. So.
Okay. Are you saying, okay, so the difference, maybe we could say, between self-defense and martial arts training is that martial arts training has more long-term goals, philosophical and physical conditioning and all these other nicer esoteric principles, where self-defense is more, classes seem to be more immediate, they're short-term. If you're a martial arts instructor and you get good students, you're ideally looking at them to be with you until hell freezes over. And they all become black belts and they all go off and teach, open up their own dojo and teach, as long as our dojo is not too close to yours. And we're self-defense, you've got maybe a 6 or 8 week course, and you've got to teach some really practical skills to people who are not necessarily physically as adept as your martial artist, and they may have a lot of inhibitions about you using some of the techniques. I know when I used to teach self-defense, and I did it a few times through the school district for teachers, surprisingly, and I don't even deal with the front snapped kick to the groin. And I said, I said, how many of you have played kickball or soccer? You know, you can't really take the time to teach a perfect front snap kick in 6 weeks, maybe 12 hours of instruction. And how many of them are going to practice this stuff at home too until they become proficient? But I say, you want to get a good kick right up the crotch. I said, you're not after this, you know, because I've had women, I think, I don't know who Lisa mentioned it the other day or someone else did. I don't want to kick a guy. It's going to hurt him in his privates. And I said, well, if you're going to kick up the crotch, you're not concerned about his privates. You're going after the pubic bone, which is easily fractured, where the urethra goes through. You kick him up there, it's easy to fracture that bone. He's going to need immediate surgery. And I think, as Lisa said, we were talking yesterday, how do you phrase it? You can't afford to be nice if you're physically defending yourself. I don't know if I'm making it more blunt, Lisa, than what you said.
Yes, thank you, sir. That was I was retelling one of my early self-defense stories, teaching in an affluent area, and I was in my early 20s as a black belt, and I remember teaching it's something with the groin grab, and this lady's telling me that she didn't want to touch a man in his private parts because it was so rude. I was just shocked because my response was, lady, this man's trying to rape you. You know, and survival is the key. And the niceties aren't part of this now. And I think I really appreciate this conversation, sir, because the way men and women are cultured in this society it is different. And self-defense is a whole new animal, and it deserves the attention as our world is becoming more and more violent and aggressive. And teaching women and those who are physically frail or victimized that it is okay to stand up for yourself and to ignite that warrior within, which sometimes is difficult and needs to be brought up by self-defense instructors, and how to ignite that inner warrior.
Right. I agree with you. I think perhaps the most difficult challenge in a self-defense class is getting your students to recognize that they really must become extremely assertive when it comes to self-defense, and that when push comes to shove, pardon the poor pun, there are no rules because this other person is trying to attack you, physically harm you, perhaps kill you. And what are your options? And as you said, it's survival. And that's your goal. And there's nothing nice about it. I've had some students that have been in street situations and they've, fortunately been successful. But it's really rough on them. When I taught junior high, another thing, I've found when you're teaching girls or women or female sex, is that you have to approach it. I found that women tend to learn techniques faster than men do because women realize they don't have the strength, and so they learn technique. Eventually, guys will catch up with the concept once they get past muscle. And that's an advantage, but I've also found that depending on your, how do you say it, social environment, one thing that was really difficult for me to do was to get women to be, if they were confronted by a guy who was just being really an SOB, to become verbally abusive, really for the intent of attracting attention. Because if you get two guys that are having an argument, verbal argument, nobody really cares. But and again, it's just the way society is, and you have to use those things. If a woman gets upset with someone and starts using every expletive that her mother and father told her never to use because otherwise she'd be eternally damned, it attracts attention. People want to see what's going on. And I found it's harder to get adult women to do that than it is to get teenagers to become verbally abusive. And I think a lot of it has to do, as Lisa said, with the environment they grew up in, the society they're in, things of that sort. There's some things that are just not socially acceptable. And that doesn't hold up on the street, because the street situation is not a socially acceptable situation. And I think that's something we have to stress in self-defense classes. That's just my opinion, based on experience. You don't have to. Your potential attacker has to know you're serious about protecting yourself, and there are ways to lower the what do you call it? Someone's referred to the term already. There are things you can do to de-escalate the situation verbally. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. A lot of it, I'll probably say 95% of it, comes down to your body language rather than what you say. It's how you say it, tone, all these other things come into play. And that's really hard to cover in a 6-week self-defense class.
Excuse me, Sensei.
Yes.
I would like to add, this is Diane Albright with Native American Judo. I would like to say one thing to impart upon the students is to, in your own methodology, is to drive home not to be afraid. That's the main thing, because I believe that's what the intimidation, that's what the search is for, the intimidation. And when a woman is not afraid, and to also impart to women, it's like, okay, I may get slapped in the face or punched, but it's okay. I will defend myself. And if I get, again, an injury, that's not going to keep me from ending this to where I can walk away. That's the whole, or even get out of the way. If it means stepping out of the way or whatever technique there is, but to show and impart not to be afraid and not to be intimidated. And that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Excellent. That's so important. I mean, I've been in situations that, mainly at the school I used to teach at, one of the schools you see, where I'd have to deal with adult gang members and that had come on campus, and there might be 2 or 3 or 4 of them, and you really have to sound calm, collected, assertive, polite, all these things. And it's amazing how successful that can be, even though you may be, afterwards you may say, how did I do that? But I think part of self-defense training is to help people become assertive and how to use their words and their physical, we say their body language, to let the other person know that you really do not want this to become a physical confrontation. Because the avoidance is a very effective self-defense weapon. Whether it be getting the other person just to turn around and walk away, or being able to run away yourself. Any?
Sensei, I'll just throw in one other thing. An important part of body language is your eyes.
Yes.
It's a good thing to have. If you haven't developed your mean look, your not going to take it anymore look, then hey, practice in front of the mirror, whatever it takes. In classroom, the fellow teachers call it the teacher look. It says, I mean business. And you can have all the great body language, you can have training, but if your eyes show fear, it's going to work against you.
Yes. And your eyes are your own eyes are your best tools to determine what the other person might be planning to do to you in terms of their body movements. I know from judo, from Seki from judo training, he said, we're on the street, says, always watch their shoulders. You don't need to watch their face, watch their shoulders. And then I learned from dealing with gang members, you also have to watch their eyes, because where their eyes goes gives a lot of language and how much they're squinting or whatnot as to what's going to happen. I mean, all of this is non-physical, but it can save your butt. If you can read the other person successfully and intimidate them to the point where it creates a potential for doubt in their minds that that maybe they won't win. Because nobody in their right mind, unless they're totally high on drugs, is going to get into a fight if they don't think they can win. That's sheer stupidity. Of course, people who get into a fight engage in sheer stupidity anyway. But so Jodi, you're sitting quietly.
I'm learning through observation.
Oh, you're okay. I'm not adverse to listening.
I just to provide a little bit about me, I first met Sensei Will more than a couple of years ago. I signed up for the Jujitsu classes as a 6-week session thinking, this is perfect. I'll learn a little self-defense. I was working in Baltimore and taking the Underground Railroad Metro line at night at Lexington Market. It's a lovely area if you've never been there. And that was what made me want to seek out self-defense classes. Some of the things that I struggled with as a female student in that, one, that was my mindset, but two, I was not used to any type of physical activity that close up to a person. So getting comfortable with just that closeness in training, that actually took a little bit of time for me. I don't think I ever really talked about that. But I know that was one of the struggles that I had. And it's something that when I've talked to other women and they're like, oh, you do that? Oh, your bodies are like that. And that's something that's kind of difficult for some women to be okay with, that close proximity to other men. Ultimately, I ended up finding that I had a love of martial arts, and I've stuck it out for multiple years instead of just the 6 to 8 week self-defense class. But in turn, being with Will and teaching the women's self-defense classes that we did, that again became one of those concerns that women had was, oh, wait, you're going to grab me here. And I think it was helpful having myself as a female to interact with them. And kind of for some people, we had one specific occasion where one of the students in that class volunteered the information that she had previously been attacked. She did not want any of the guys to grab her because that was a trigger for her, but she also wanted to face this and wanted to have this class at the same time. So I think that's a difficulty for some people that's not really discussed. But when we were teaching that class, one of the first things that we talked about, even if we're getting into the very granular of where are their eyes, where are their shoulders, was one, what are you doing? Do you have both of your headphones in, not paying attention to what's going on? Are you just looking down at your phone? I would relay the stories of, hey, if you're going to meet somebody for online dating or going on Craigslist and you're meeting someone to pick something up, does anyone know where you are? So in a much more larger sense of awareness before even getting down to that granular, I think is also important to drive home.
Okay. I think one thing there's I don't know if the term is called social distancing or what, but every culture has what's called personal space. And in the US, it's generally 18 inches to 2 or 3 feet is your personal space. That works nice, ideally, but when you're dealing in a multicultural society, I mean, at high school I taught, we had 52 languages spoken. I would have some kids that would be right in my face, and it took me a number of years to get used to that. And they weren't threatening. It's just that different cultures have different personal spaces. And that's one thing, as Jodi has brought up, is that you have this personal space. And for most people, someone gets inside that personal space, it can be very threatening to you. And so one of the challenges, another challenge for self-defense, being a shorty course, is how do you help students get beyond this psychological personal space, which really doesn't exist in a street situation. Because just because a person gets within your personal space, that does not allow you to, quote unquote, defend yourself with physical action. In most states. There are exceptions. So, you know, personal space is another issue. And you are correct. I've had women that have been apprehensive about, you know, grabbing onto a guy or getting that close. A couple of them have had experiences that were not, I'll put it very tactful, not positive. But eventually they got over the fear of having that close physical contact. It is a process when you run into it. And you cannot say to the person, whether it be male or female, your feelings are wrong. Because that's not going to get you as an instructor anywhere, nor is it going to get them anywhere. You have, you know, you have to meet people where they're at and work from there. Okay, let's see who else has been sitting quietly. Diane, you have any words on this or something else?
Hey, hello, this is Wilinar. For me, when usually for women, some of them, maybe they're physically not as strong, and maybe some of them, that personality is a little bit timid. And so they want to, but yet they want to protect themselves. That's why they want some self-defense training. And sometimes they ask me, is that, well, you know, I'm not that strong. I'm kind of petite. So, but if somebody grabbed me, what can I do? So I said, well, first of all, that's why you learn self-defense. And I would just give them a few suggestions, because if I am not physically as strong, the most strong part of my body, it's actually my leg. So I will kick like crazy. And then also, if somebody grabs you and when their hands are busy, I said, you know, you have long fingernail, go for the eyes and just dig right into it. And I believe that they will have to let go. So that kind of things will kind of give them a little bit ideas that, okay, that is something that I could do. It's not that I'm going to be completely defensive just because somebody is bigger than me or stronger than me. So that alone, I think, will help give them a little bit encouragement to say, hey, you know, continue to learn, because most important that you have to have some kind of defense if you're being attacked. So that's just what I wanted to mention.
Okay. One thing you mentioned was, you know, go for their eyes. One of the things I found was that there are some women that are hesitant because they don't want to blind the guy. And so my response is, if you don't want to go for, digging in there, go with a scratch, scratching across. And most women will find that to be quote unquote socially acceptable to do. No, it's not. Getting your iris, your what is it, iris, your retina, whatever it is, your eye scratch is not a permanent injury. But if you've ever had your eyes scratched, it's going to cause you to keep your eyes closed for half a minute or a minute or so until your body can kind of adjust to it. And I've had that happen several times when I'm trimming bushes and stuff like that. I get very involved, and sometimes a branch will cut across my face, and it takes me a minute or two to get being able to hold my eyes open. And so sometimes you have to find things that are, I don't know if the term is socially acceptable, but you have to find things that, okay, I can do this. It's a workaround. Yes, going for the guy's eyes might be an ideal, but in a street situation, my personal opinion, those two eyes are a pretty small target. If you can just take your nails and just scratch across, you've got a good chance of getting them anyway. And it's probably easier for anyone to do than trying to poke their eyes out, so it's just an alternative thing to look at.
Sensei, if I may jump in here for just a sec, I want to take advantage of the class today and ask these ladies who have trained for a period of time, your experience when you're sparring against a fellow female or sparring against men. For example, doing just something as simple as a basic hand throw on a lady versus a guy, as opposed to say like a basic hip throw. How different does that feel to you when you're throwing someone who's female, perhaps about your height and about your weight, as opposed to throwing somebody who's you have a lower center of gravity, which can give you an advantage, but somebody who's got more gristle, more muscle, and more mass. How different is that experience for you? Substantial or slight?
Actually, I'd like to speak to that. Thank you for asking the question.
Yes, ma'am.
I started my training in 1974, and I think it was at least 4 years before I ever saw another girl on the mat. So I mostly with guys, all with guys, and including competing with them. And again, I was 11 when I started, so I was a younger person then. But I think that being able to train with men and really learn what it feels like to deal with that type of size, strength, mass, and it is something that even though I'm strong pound for pound for being female, I cannot imitate or replicate what it's like to be a 6-foot man who weighs 250 pounds with big hands and that strength. So I think having male attackers in women's self-defense classes when it is appropriate to do so is a really important thing. It's a confidence builder. It's realistic, and I think that all women's self-defense classes with just women without any male attackers is a disservice. And I'll go even further in saying that I was a black belt for over 10 years before I took my first women's self-defense class in another system, and it was a padded attacker. And that changed my mind and blew my mind in that experience of what a padded attacker training is like. And I would definitely recommend that padded attacker be added to any women's self-defense class. And if you're not sure what that is, I'd be glad to talk a little bit more about that. But it's a padded suit, and I'm a police officer by trade with 33 years of experience. We call it red man suit in the police world, but it's the same thing. And being able to go full force and not worry about hurting the attacker, including a mask which has a screen for eyes, so you can actually go after the eyes and hit, is a phenomenal training experience. And it really did. It rocked my world, and it really changed my perspective when it came to self-defense techniques.
Excellent.
Thanks for asking the question about male attackers.
Thank you.
I'd love to back up with that, Lisa, because I agree wholeheartedly that yes, the self-defense classes, while it's helpful to have the woman, having the male attackers, I think it's crucial. I know you can't tell on camera, but I'm a mere 5'1". So I would argue almost every class we were ever in, I was always the shortest one, unless the kids were there.
True.
And for me, when I first started training as a white belt, I lacked a lot of confidence, and being able to throw them in and know that, oh, if I'm doing this technique properly, I really can do this. And, you know, there were a few that if I didn't have the technique right, they would make sure that they stood in place so that I could get it correct. But the confidence that built, and not in overinflated self, but just the true confidence of, oh, okay, in this environment, I am capable. And I think that helped me in, not necessarily I wasn't attacked on the street, but it helped me in walking out and going to that, you know, train station and whatnot, and where I would feel uncomfortable, I could walk with my shoulders back, with my head up, paying more attention. So that confidence translated into other areas of my life that made me feel safer.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the things I did there were a few times when I taught self-defense course at a local junior college, and it was taught in the evening, and the final exam was a walk across the campus. And this just might give some of you some ideas. And what I did was I got some of my male black belts who the students had never seen before, and they wore white tape on their wrists, upper arms, around their head, around the chest. And that was so that as the students walked this course, if they were attacked by someone who didn't have white tape, I said, go full bore. But just to identify them as a legitimate attacker. Some people on that walk were attacked 2 or 3 times. Some people were not attacked at all, but they all said it was probably one of the most worthwhile experiences they had, because it made them become more aware of their environment. They kept their eyes open, and they said that was the most important lesson they learned. And you know, now that necessarily wasn't my intention, but it was, you know, sometimes as a teacher you do certain things, and the students end up what they've learned is different from what you expected, and you say, okay, but you know, and at the end, the several, I had like actually 5 or 6 black belts on this walk, on this, you know, self-defense walk, and they made their comments to the students as well in terms of how effective they felt they were. So it might be an idea, if any of you are teaching self-defense classes and you're doing it in the evening or at night, that this is something you might want to try. The students did get a lot out of it. You know, they compared notes with each other and what they did, and this exchange between students on what they did is very important, because they're giving each other feedback rather than the teacher giving them feedback. And we tend to learn more from our peers than we do from anyone else. So it's something, you know, it's something you might want to consider as an activity. If you can get enough black belts to be brave enough to do this.
George,
want to add something to that and remind everyone, I forgot who said it, but somebody mentioned it earlier. There are women who are not going to participate if there are men in the room. And that's an interesting dichotomy, because I've had groups where, you know, oh, we really want men in the class so we can practice on men. And then in the same group, there's going to be a couple women that say, I'm not even going to come to the class if there's a man there.
Yeah, I've been to self-defense classes where, and this is rare, but you'd have women who would just outright refuse to be touched. They're really uncomfortable with it. And when they refuse, it's not like a demand or anything like that. You can see the timidness in their eyes. So they're afraid and they're not accustomed to it. I wanted to mention something that Sensei Wilinar mentioned earlier about some women may consider themselves they may think that they lack the strength to do the techniques or to do this, that, the other thing. I had a late aunt who owned a clothing store in West Oakland, and she mainly catered to gang members and drug dealers. And you know, some of her customers that come in may be a little bit intimidating, may be very demanding in a really rude way. And she was an expert at shutting them up and you know, putting them in their place. And she was maybe about not even 5 feet tall, and maybe in her 60s. But the way she carried herself, you just did not mess with her. So it goes to show the importance of how you carry yourself in these situations, so that you won't you diffuse an attack just by that.
Yeah, I would agree, and again, one of the issues we face in teaching self-defense, or even in a martial arts class, is to help students develop their self-confidence and how do you say that, their self-confidence, but and also their assertiveness to handle a lot of situations while still being as diplomatic as possible. That's a good excuse word.
As assertive.
Assertive, because you want other people to understand where you're at without being threatening. And that's hard to do. And it's a skill.
I used to tell people that if you're going somewhere, you need to walk with confidence, walk like you have a purpose. And it just exudes more confidence. It just makes you look like someone who's got a plan, someone who's doing what they're going to do, and less attractive to a would-be attacker.
Right.
Professor Durek used to say, walk down the street with a New York attitude.
Good way of describing it.
One thing I would do if I was doing a self-defense class the first week, and usually I'd get, you know, go to Starbucks or some other what do you call it, Baskin Robbins, get some either freebie coupons or something like that, and I'd get 3 women to be volunteers, and I'd have one of them dress up very professionally, very conservatively. A second one dress up very sexily, and a third one show up in a house dress, hair up in curlers, smoking, you know, not with a lit cigarette, with a cigarette in their mouth or chewing gum. And my first question is, which one of these women makes the best rape victim? And it's amazing that very few other women will actually pick the woman who is in a house dress with a hair up in curlers, all these things that essentially show low self-esteem. Because what an attacker looks for ideally is a person with low self-esteem, lack of confidence. They don't know where they're going. They're unsure. These people, it doesn't matter what sex, these people make better victims. There's also body language you can look at, which is why, you know, I always just say, you know, if you can walk in groups, it's better than walking by yourself. You know, how are you holding your, you know, if you're using a purse, how are you holding it? If you're a male, what's your hand position when you're walking? If your palms are facing your sides, you're probably in better physical shape. If your hands are facing the back of you, you're also being slumped shouldered, which is an indication of not as good physical shape. There are a lot of little body language things that make you a quote unquote better victim. And students need to be aware of this as well, because in some situations it's like wearing a sign that says attack me, and for other people it's a sign that says you don't want to do this. and you know, so it's hard to get students to get into this mindset. And this doesn't matter whether it's martial arts or self-defense. It's hard for students to get into this mindset and not be fearful. That's the other part, because people tend to do these things out of fear, but you can't live your life in fear. And, you know, I don't know, I can't think of the proper term for it. It's just, you know, yes, part of it's assertiveness, but part of it's, I forget, maybe a term is, if you're familiar with the term CYA, part of it's is there anyone who does not know what CYA means? I used the term in high school with my kids in junior high. I just told them that it was cover your assets. And they could figure out the reality, but you know, you gotta have fun with people. But you have to be proactive. I think that's the correct word. And that is so true in many situations in life. The more prepared you are to deal with a situation, the less likely you are to have to deal with that situation. So
Yeah, that was the word that came to my mind, is, you know, not paranoid or worried, but prepared.
yeah. Yep. Just a second, please. An attacker can see paranoia.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
I think that's the real value with these like short self-defense classes, for like a week to however long they are. If it's not sustained training, the most valuable thing they can take away from it is that that personal awareness or situational awareness, because for a less physically gifted person to overcome a stronger and more physically imposing opponent, their skill has to be exponentially greater. And I think it's we have to be careful not to create this false sense of security that they can overcome that without sustained training.
Yeah, I mean, when I've taught self-defense classes, I'm very honest with my students in a self-defense class, bluntly at times. But one of the first things I'll say is, we can have this 6-week or 8-week or whatever it is self-defense course, and you're going to learn some physical skills and maybe some things that change your attitude and to be more proactive, yada, yada, yada. I said, but these self-defense skills are not going to be of any value to you until you can practice them to the point where they become automatic reactions. In martial arts, we call that mushin. Because until they're an automatic reaction, and some people are familiar with the term I use, deer in the headlights. An attacker is there anyone who's not familiar with the term deer in the headlights? Okay. It basically means it takes you maybe half a second to 1.5 seconds to recognize what's going on. It's like you're traveling down a highway and a deer steps out on the highway, and then you've got antlers coming through your windshield. But anyway, because they're just stunned, they don't know what to do. And the hardest part in making self-defense training, martial arts training, self-defense training, is to close that time gap. And you can only do that with practice. I know with the law enforcement, I know with my experiences with the Los Angeles Police Department, they had to qualify for firearm certification every month. It was through the efforts of me and several other martial artists after the Rodney King incident that they changed their policy that self-defense skills had to be recertified every year. I don't know whether that's still the case, but law enforcement does not place the same priority on various things for various reasons. And the LAPD was quite upfront, says we can't get the funding to do that much recertification on all the things that we would like to do. And that unfortunately puts police officers at a disadvantage. But we all, I as a public school teacher could not get all the materials I wanted because of funding. And I think that affects all of us to some extent. We can't buy all the things we want for our dojo or our household or our kids because of funding. So it's the training has to be there, and I will lose half my students after that first night because I make that comment that it's probably going to take you a good half year or a year of training at home on your own, finding someone to train on to the point where it becomes automatic, because that's what it has to be. And you're shaking your heads up now. Yes, you know that as a martial artist. If you've taught self-defense for years, you know that as a self-defense instructor.
Sometimes you'd be surprised what an untrained person can do, though.
Pardon?
So sometimes you'd be surprised at what an untrained person can do when they're fighting for their life.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
Sure.
you can. I mean, they think things will happen, but the more you practice, the more what you're trying to do is increase your chances of survival. And I have never told a student, martial artist or self-defense instructor, if you get in a street confrontation, you will win. I would never tell anyone that. But the more training you have, the greater your chances of survival. And that's what you're after. And because some people in self-defense courses think that they're going to get 6 weeks of training and they will become invincible.
You graduate with a Superman shirt.
It's what I thought when I started.
Who just said something?
I said it's what I thought when I started.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of. I mean, it's not an uncommon. It's not an uncommon concept. Here's Sensei Kirby. He's been teaching for 57 years. He's got a 10th degree black belt. In 6 weeks, he's going to teach me the most important skills that he knows that will guarantee that I will be successful in defending myself in any situation.
Not gonna happen.
But I think
Go ahead.
we all agree that some of the other skills that are imparted during self-defense training, and those have been mentioned by my esteemed colleagues, about situational awareness or avoidance, body language and command presence, and even using your voice. And those things are really, really important and open up a student's eyes. Also, many of us women who are martial artists now will tell you that their first introduction to martial arts was a self-defense class. So that's how we got in started, and then we got hooked. and became lifelong martial artists. So yeah, we're not going to sell them a magic pill, but I think there's a lot of justice to be to be said for even just bringing up people's situational awareness and confidence and body language and using voice and things like that, and avoiding conflict are really, really important parts of martial arts that aren't always, or in self-defense, which aren't really taught all that much in a martial arts class, but it really changed the mindset of the students. And that's where I think we want to go to, is the mindset first, because your mind is your most powerful tool. And then the heart set and confidence, and then being realistic too. And when you have to, try things against bigger people, you learn the limitations also, and learn how much more you don't know. And I think that's also serves as an incentive.
Right. If a person is serious about protecting themselves, they will learn. They'll go beyond a self-defense class, because they realize that this self-defense class, and I'm not knocking self-defense training programs. And I really like who mentioned the full body padding. Yes. If whether you be male or female, if you've ever had the opportunity to deal with that, I've been there once. It is such a valuable experience. And yes, the equipment it can be cumbersome for the person that's wearing it. It has to be worn correctly. But it is such a valuable experience, because you can really cut loose in terms of what you're doing without fear of injuring your training partner.
George, that's not completely true, because it will protect the wearer from strikes. It is useless against most joint locks.
Right. I will agree with you on that. Yes. It's like I've had people ask me, what kind of dummy can I get to practice jujitsu on? And my return comment, if I detect kind of a snide attitude in the process, I'll say a dumb one. And then I get serious, but what kind of dummy can I get to practice throws on, or do judo techniques? And the problem you run into is that there really are no dummies available to effectively practice joint locks on.
Right.
And for women or smaller people, joint locks are what are going to protect, and strikes are what are going to protect, and some sweeps are what's going to protect you, rather than some of the more heavy duty judo throws. And I think it's self-defense class. I think the only judo type throw I teach are Osotogari and Ouchigari, inner sweeping throw, because that's all you can really cover. But you got to have a lot of other stuff going for you in the process, even to make those work. And there are a lot of jujitsu techniques I won't teach in a self-defense class. They're just too difficult to learn or practice. But joint locks tend to work better, and so that's what I tend to work with, and some strikes and kicks and hits. So and a lot of it depends on the group you're teaching too. But my main goal has always been to try and help the students become more assertive, because that's like someone else said here, it's your mind is your most effective tool in defending yourself, but it has to be trained. Okay.
I'll follow up on that, George. The summary that I ended up with after so many self-defense classes, and so few of those participants ended up actually joining the regular dojo, my goal was, you got to be able to do something. If I can get you past the point of deer in the headlights to doing something, then we've accomplished what we were trying to do. But beyond that, I was fooling myself to think that we were going to accomplish much more.
Right.
But it was a big deal to be able to get to that point, because we'd have people come in and say they really had frozen before when something had happened. They knew they were going to do it again. Get to the point where do something.
Yeah.
Scream, kick, flail, bite, I don't care. Do something. And that was my goal. That
Yeah.
seemed to be.
I've seen that a lot through the years where I think it's something I always see, like with when you have these self-defense things like that, is I think sometimes the people doing it do it in good faith. Like they'll have a self-defense class, have a women's self-defense class for a week or whatever. And I think that comes from almost like an advertisement for the class, like a way to get new students into your school. And even if you mean well, I think they don't realize that it's only that you're only doing an advertisement if you don't do it very successfully. And I think what we're hearing is, even if you do it very successfully, there's no such thing as a successful 6-week class unless they continue doing it beyond that on their own even. So really the only self-defense is to become a martial artist, where you learn, even if you only learn one thing, you're becoming a martial artist that you have to keep that one thing going. Nothing will ever happen if you do it for 6 weeks and stop. And ideally they will continue into the dojo, but if they don't, it's a missed opportunity. And I think people do it genuinely to try to offer that. Like, if you're not going to come to the dojo, at least you can get something, but that something is almost valueless if they don't come to the dojo. And that's kind of a weird catch-22 of trying to offer this. You know, you try to offer these sessions, and with the appeal of, in a short amount of time, you can learn some basic things, but then there's like an asterisk of like, but not really. You kind of need to keep doing this forever to make it really work. And I'm kind of curious too, I mean, rightly so, we focus a lot on the idea of a man is the one attacking, you know, so it's self-defense against a man. But it seems to me too that there's, how much exploration is there of woman-initiated violence? Like, there's female prisons that are filled with female criminals that do violent, you know, crimes. So it's not unlikely that a woman would be the one attacking you. And that seems like, from what I've seen, the violence and the types of attacks are very different than what a man might initiate. So is there any emphasis on how to deal with a woman attacking you also?
Okay. I can speak from some experience. The basic concept, how do you say, men, in most situations, men have rules when they fight. There are certain things you, quote unquote, do not do because you want to be fighting fairly. Women have no rules. They are, women are simply far more efficient fighters because they have no qualms about biting, scratching, pulling out hair, kicking, all these things that men are not supposed to do when they fight. And the junior high where I taught it, the principal simply said, if you have to break up a fight between girls, make sure there are two of you. Hopefully it's in a window. Grab someone's jacket, pull it over the girl's head, bear hug her from behind to pull them apart, and be prepared to be kicked and scratched and bit. And that's what we were told. And Melina's kind of cracking up here in a much restrained manner. But yeah, there is a difference. And I'll tell my kids and adults in jiu-jitsu, women are simply more efficient fighters because they have, you know, they realize that when it's a fight, it's survival. It's not showing that you're stronger than the other person. I've never, when I've seen girls are, and this is not women, this is a girl. I've never seen a girl say to another girl, I'm going to prove I'm stronger than you are. They'll usually come out with some expletive, which when they grow up, they don't use because it's not polite to say, like, and it's intimidating. What they're saying verbally is meant to be intimidating. And that's a difference from being a challenge where a guy says, you're wrong, I'm going to beat the crap out of you. That's an attempt, that's just what they're going to do. Girls, I don't know about women, adult women, but I know girls, they will use far more expletives. They are far more direct. They're far more verbally abusive. And I don't want to stereotype women, which I'm doing here to some extent. But our society has certain rules of behavior based upon sex. Whether that's right or wrong is a totally different matter. And like I said before, women are simply more efficient fighters because they have no rules.
I'd like to jump in. I think women are more vicious when it comes to.
Yes, that's a better word.
And yeah, and some of that is cultural. Some of it, when I try to ignite the warrior within, a lot of women have a hard time defending themselves. So I bring up the point, okay, it's your child being attacked. Your child is being attacked. Now, how are you going to respond?
Right.
And different animal that comes out, because even a mouse, with babies, when confronted, will fight. And
Yes.
it can be terribly vicious. It's the smallest animal we have. So, but men and women do fight differently. I did work in a jail, so I can tell you I would much rather work with 300 men on the men's side than 30 women on the women's side, because the women were more vicious and nasty and conniving and all those things that men say bad about women. I found to be true when working in the jail with that population. So, the fighting is different. I don't know as far as street violence goes, what the stats are. Diane, who is an anthropologist and who I've asked to bring into this conversation, has done a lot regarding aggression and both animal and human, might have more stats on what the odds are of being attacked, being a female being attacked by another female. And I think that was what your question was, not if you're a man being attacked by a female. Is that correct, sir?
Sorry, muted. Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So maybe Diane, I can get my esteemed colleague to jump into this conversation.
Sure. Yes. My background is in biology and anthropology. My advisor was a world expert in aggressive behavior in primates. So that's sort of my background that merged with 40 plus years of jujitsu. So I teach women to recognize the behavioral signals of aggression because they're very plain and obvious once you recognize them. More importantly, I'd like to bring up a topic that's important for maybe men to get a perspective on, because men are attacked very differently than women are, not just with regard to the physical attacks that come, but you're probably aware of it. 80% of attacks on women are by someone they know, by an intimate partner, by a spouse, by an acquaintance or a friend. So there's sort of this, we tend to go into the tangent of, being aware of your surroundings and stranger danger and watch out for that. But 4 out of 5 attacks on a woman are by someone she already knows and is likely in an intimate relationship with. So that's a whole different thing to try to work with when you're training somebody than being aware of your surroundings and looking for that person you don't know who might assault you. So that's a perspective, maybe one of those things I know you're trying to get a handle on, is the difference in training women versus training men. Women face that, and that completely colors their approach to the world with regard to their own personal safety, because, you know, when men are assaulted, it might be a guy they know, but that's, you know, a slap in the face or a hit to the face or whatever, you know, that's not sexual violence, right? Far less likely to be sexual violence. So that is one perspective that I feel it's really important to recognize, and one that maybe the male instructors here just don't have that perspective, because that's not your perspective. But to keep that in mind and be aware of that. I personally have trained women who seemed very timid at first to learn, but I could tell they wanted to learn. And then once I got to know them, after a matter of time, they would start to tell me that, you know, they were afraid in their own house, right? I mean, imagine living your life 24/7 in your house, being afraid of being attacked. That's kind of, you know, no wonder women are terrorized and afraid, you know. There are way too many women that live in those kinds of environments and circumstances. So keep that in mind when you're training women. Would be one of the things I would say.
So we kind of
How
have
would that change what you do if you're teaching women versus men?
Yeah, and that is the hardest, most complex question of all, right? That's why teaching self-defense, and I offer self-defense classes, and mostly I get women here and there, especially when I teach seminars. I kind of specialize in training individuals going off to college, because college campuses are a significant source of assaults, right?
Amen.
We know that 1 in 4 college women will be assaulted while in college. We know that 1 in 13 men on campus will be assaulted while on campus. So it's not just women. So I've had men come to my self-defense seminars who were 17, 18, going off to college and wanted to learn skills, but mostly it's women. So a large part of the discussion that's here is about personal confidence and self-esteem, right? And building that kind of self-confidence. That's where someone who is in a bad situation at home or in a relationship with someone starts to develop that ability to be able to walk away from that relationship, or to try to protect themselves or get away from it, because it's very insidious, right? How do you combat a lifetime of how someone, you know, has been sort of, as women, we're enculturated to be polite, right? We're enculturated to not be, you know, physical or violent or aggressive. That's one of the toughest things to try to overcome when you're training somebody for a couple weeks. How do you do that? You do it by building their self-confidence. You do that through physical skills. That is a positive feedback loop. The more confident they feel in their physical skills, the more emotionally and psychologically confident and strong they're going to feel. But it's a building process. I always, in a group of, my last seminar, I had 15 women. I always scope them out, and I see who I'm good at reading. I'm good at reading people. So I know after about 5 minutes, I know the women in the group who are the most self-confident, the ones who come and just want to learn how to hit and strike and whatever, and they already kind of have it. I mean, I'm sure you've all had a seminar where you've kind of recognized that. You can read it and you can see the women who are getting it and they're confident, the way they walk. We've talked about that. So I always make sure that I specifically pick those women to first do a technique I'm showing on the male instructors that I have working with me. And then once the women in the group who maybe don't have that kind of self-confidence, once they see another woman in their group doing a technique and effectively, you know, defending themselves, then I find it's like a snowball effect. So make sure actually that you don't pick, you know, a woman who seems to be very tentative first. pick a woman to display or show demonstrate a technique that you've taught everybody first with the male instructor is what I find really builds confidence really quickly and really well. It's like I said, like a snowball effect. So I hope that helps from my personal experience in teaching women's self-defense classes. Thanks.
So it kind of sounds like there's almost like a fallacy of substitution and like a kind of like so we're kind of training all wrong for women, really. Like, so what we're talking about when we say women's self-defense, we are talking about that, like what you're saying is roughly 20% and like 1 out of 4 scenario that you're training for. The idea of like you're walking down a dark alley and an unknown man grabs you in a bear hug. That's when you can stomp on their foot and hit them in the groin and headbutt them and spit in their face and run away and yell fire and do all of that. And you can train for that. But it sounds like that doesn't happen to anyone. What you need to be training for is, you're on a date that you want to get out of and it went too long and you're already holding hands and you were okay with that, but now it just escalated and you're not okay. And how do you get out of that? And now, and that headbutt stomping their foot self-defense is completely not applicable here. And they're kind of coming to you to build this self-confidence about a fear they have. But the thing you're giving them confidence about is a fear that they don't have. Like you're treating a situation they won't face to give confidence about the situation they are in, rather than addressing that situation. Like the relationship they're in has a problem. If that person is ultimately going to be the one that attacks them, that's who they should be trying to defend against by getting out of that relationship, by not making those choices, by whatever, getting help for that. There's no amount of headbutting the masked villain in the dark alleyway that will ever help you cope with this, because it's just so different in your own mind. So like you're getting this self-confidence that you can handle yourself in a situation, but I don't see that then it makes the situation you're in any better. Like I feel like it still happens and then they almost feel worse because I should have been able to defend myself. I do self-defense and I don't know. How do you address the actual underlying? It seems like they're coming with a fear and then we're like, well, let's just quench any fear and hope we got the right fear. How do we address the real fear and get them out of the real attack? Like what is the real self-defense for that kind of thing?
Well, it does happen. Women are assaulted. People are assaulted on the street by people they don't know.
Right.
I was pulled off a bicycle myself years ago when I was riding home one night. I was in another country and I was assaulted like that. I was pulled off my bicycle and grabbed, right, by somebody, just whatever, and absolutely, in that culture, women don't swear. And I absolutely went into a tirade of swearing. And literally, he fell back and threw my bike back at me and ran off because I knew that I knew how to read the situation and I was outraged too. So I don't want to imply that that doesn't happen because that does happen.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it is far more likely for a woman to be assaulted by somebody she already knows and is close with.
Right.
So, but there is no way that teaching every woman that comes in front of you physical skills, striking skills, wrist grab evasion skills, body grab, situation awareness, that is lost on anyone, because building that physical confidence makes it more likely that a woman who is in a relationship that is not good for her, it makes it more likely that she is psychologically going to speak up for herself and fight back if she does get assaulted. So I don't want to imply that those skills are not important in every single situation where you're teaching somebody self-defense, whether male or female, because it's a positive feedback loop. It builds the physical, builds the emotional and the mental strength, and then that builds more physical skills, right? It all works together. But just to have that awareness that building, we know that what my opinion, 3/4 of a fight is your mental preparedness. It's whether or not you're ready to fight, right? The techniques matter. Yeah, they do. But far more likely that if you don't have the ability to say internally to yourself, I'm going to survive, I'm not going to be a victim, I'm going to fight back, you won't. It doesn't matter your level of training. And so that's, to me, is what the important thing is, that you're building. It's situations that I use in my seminars. So I put people in a situation, an actual situation where somebody's coming up to them and saying, different things to them, and they're not backing down, and they're sort of standing up for themselves physically and verbally. So I like to use those situational kinds of, and I also like to ask the women in the group, what are you afraid of? What are the things you're worried about? What do you think is going to happen to you? Because that's really important, because then you may have a woman in the group who actually had a situation and she's ready to talk about it and say, so I had this guy, fill in the blank, whatever she says. I had a woman in my a seminar of mine last year who had been walking in a forest preserve, just taking a walk, and a guy started following her, and she was very helpful. And fortunately, she was close to her car. So she sped up, she got to her car. She saw my seminar a month later, took it. So she took my basic seminar for 3 hours, taught her and the other women in the group about basic awareness skills, basic striking, wrist grabs, which are probably one of the most common grabs that women face. She came back in the fall and took my seminar again. I recognized her, and she said, I really needed to learn more, and I just needed to practice it and do more. So when women, but she was able to tell her story at that point about what had happened to her. And then all the other women in the group heard it. So my advice too is also to ask women, some won't be ready to share, but some will, not what happened to you, but what are you concerned about? Tell me a scenario you're concerned about, and let's walk through it. Let's do a practical walkthrough. You're going to your car, let's walk through SMART skills, that kind of thing. And that tends to bring out other questions and other things. And then they know that you are actually aware of and concerned about what their fears are and what their concerns are too. And it might be different than what you think you need to teach them. You have a perspective on what you think is important, and then they have a perspective of, this is what I'm worried about, what I'm concerned about. I don't know. That's a long-winded answer. Did that address?
It was a great answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to comment on two things that Diana said. And from the first part, if you have a student who wants to talk with you, the most important thing you can do is take the time to listen. For two reasons. One, you're going to, well, a number of reasons. You're going to learn more about that student. You may find out what their issue is, and perhaps you might be able to help them. Three, other students are going to see what you're doing, and that will, depending on how you handle your listening, they may become more receptive to what you're saying, or they may open up with issues they're having as well. And your most effective tool in teaching, doesn't matter what the subject is two-way communication. Or what your relationship is. It's two-way communication. I, as a school teacher at the beginning of the year, because I have a history of, we could talk about almost anything in my classroom. But I'd say at the beginning of the year, I said, these are the things that I am, if you want to talk with me, these are the things that I am required by law to inform the administration of. And I'd go through them. They basically were in the area of child abuse, and that, if I suspected child abuse or thing of that, I said, I have to do it. I don't, and I said, it's in your interest. surprising, I would imagine some kids, they would, that had problems in the classroom or even in jujitsu classes or in the park programs I've run. Once you get to know your students, as Diane said, it's very important. They will open up to you more. And that's a valuable learning experience for you and for them. Okay. The other thing that Diane brought up, which is really important in self-defense or martial arts training, is if you can have a girl who is, learning a technique quickly and can do it well and can do it on a man, or as I had, a couple of my girls had been in street situations and they went off to high school, but they would come back as aides for me in the jiu-jitsu classes. And, they were stood maybe 5'2", 5'3", and they could show these techniques and they worked for them, and that inspired the other girls to become more assertive, because sometimes you just need to see someone else do it. And both these girls had, effectively in the process of doing what it was, they both used joint locking techniques. They were small and petite. None of these, there wasn't a Harigoshi or Hari Makikomi or Ukiyotoshi or any of these really super jujitsu throws. They used joint locking techniques. They ended up fracturing joints on their attacker. Their attacker in both cases ended up being arrested by the police for attempted assault. One with an attempted assault with a deadly weapon. What, like I said, if it's nice if you and the instructor can show how a technique works on a bigger attacker, hunky-dory. But if you're a small little petite lady and you can do this technique effectively on a significantly larger male, it makes an impression. And that's, as a teacher, that's what you're after. For the students to see that, yes, this technique has a good chance of working. And if they can see that, they're going to say, I can try this, and maybe I can do this as well. And Diane, I want to thank you for bringing those 2 points up. When I've taught self-defense women, I don't know what the statistics are now. I know when I originally taught it, this would be going back to the 1970s, the FBI statistics were if you were sexually assaulted by a male, there was a 1 in 4 chance that it would be a fatality. And so you're not just going to get beat up. And that's a totally inappropriate term, I understand, for sexual assault, but there's a good chance you may end up dead. And that takes the importance of defending yourself to a whole new level. Because that's, a 25% chance of fatality in a particular situation is not something you can look at and say, gee, oh well, because life doesn't work that way, at least not in my book. So it's I think as Diane is saying, part of our challenge, perhaps more as male instructors, is to help women develop a sense that they can do this stuff. Am I close, Diane?
Absolutely. I always, when I teach, whether it's a seminar, I teach women in class or whenever, I always bring up the book, The Gift of Fear, which the group may or may not be familiar with. So, I talk about Gavin DeBeck, and I talk about, because my background is in biology and aggression, I because you know that every woman that walks in has these fears, right? Is there, that's why they're there, right? Because they're concerned, about their safety. So when you speak to that having a fear is okay, it's actually natural. It's a part of your biology to feel fear. Don't deny the fear. Don't listen to the fear. So I find most women connect with me really intensely when I talk to them and explain to them that fear has a purpose. Feel the fear. Don't let it make you afraid. Don't let it freeze you. Don't let it put you into denial. Feel the fear and say, I've got a feeling in the pit of my stomach. Recognize it and act on it. Learn to turn that into action. Learn to turn that into this defense of yourself. Learn how to focus your fear into the positive. Don't deny it. Don't tamp it down. And I find that women respond generally pretty well to that, because I never tell a woman don't listen to fear. I say don't be afraid. Don't let your fear turn into the state of being afraid, right? Work on that. And the way you work on that is to recognize the fear and understand it, and then to channel it into, what am I going to turn that fear into? I'm going to listen to it. There's something not right. I'm walking to my car and I feel something in my stomach. Listen to it. That's because there's something not right. And now channel it into, what am I actually going to do? What is my fear going to channel into in terms of action? I find women respond really well to that. They're just, in general, that's a really positive thing. And that doesn't really involve any physical skills. That's a part of awareness, if that helps.
Okay. First of all, Gift of Fear, excellent book. If you haven't read it, read it. Have your students read it. Okay. All of our training does not have to be learned on the mat. Okay. Second good book. And this one is Gavin de Becker, okay, the author. The other one is Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, University of Chicago. I've spoken with him. His students call him Dr. C. Because most of them can't pronounce his name. But another excellent book. His subsequent books were not as good as his first one. And this book, for those of you that are into the concept of Mushin, he's a physical psychologist or something of that sort. And he basically says that flow, he uses the word flow, but it's the same as Mushin. It just you train your mind to work automatically. And he essentially provides a Western proof for this Oriental concept. And it's just a really neat process he goes through. And he also says in his book, the only way you can really develop flow is through the study of a martial art or yoga. He says, because both of those tend to work on developing the concept of things happening automatically. And so they're both good books. Thank you, Diane. Thank you. Okay. What else did we have to cover in this topic? Lisa, we're not going to leave one topic untouched, which has been untouched right now. And I'm going to approach this topic very tactfully. Is either sex more effective at teaching women self-defense? Did I take our discussion issue from yesterday, one of them, and put it in very tactful terms?
Well, with all due respect to my brothers, and I appreciate all the gentlemen here who are here having this conversation, because I think we're covering some stuff that isn't really talked about, as classes are being taught by senseis to their junior instructors, etc. And so I want to thank you all for being here, because I think it's really important. And if women are 51% of our population, and the most vulnerable, I appreciate that the men are stepping up and wanting to be part of the solution to empower women, whether they be your female students, your daughters, your wives, your nieces and nephews. That I think it's really important, especially in this time and in this country. And because we know that most martial arts instructors, I think 90% are male. We, as the women, need to enlighten our brothers and to teach you what we know, maybe instinctively and through our life experience, so that you can become better instructors and be able to teach these skills and be more effective. So there is a group of folks who are not martial artists, who believe that they have captured a corner of the market as far as self-defense goes. I have a little issue with that, because I don't think you're going to tell me, maybe it's ego driven, that my 50 years of martial arts experience and my 33 years of being on the street as a police officer, that I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to self-defense. But I do believe that it is more than the physical skill, and it's more than what I was originally taught as a self-defense instructor, which was just physical stuff back in the day. I learned from my instructor what he learned from his instructor. And I think it's important to bring in some of the academic world, and also bring in some of the psychological and sociological aspects of self-defense, because they, as I think through this discussion, are showing that they are just as powerful, or at least at 50%, a part of this conversation as well. And I think Diane and some of the other female instructors who may have this training or more experience with it can talk a little bit more about it, and marrying the two so that we are effective in our message. And as instructors, right, our students are our report cards. How they do is how well we teach. And I take that personally as my own benchmark. And I want to be the most effective teacher I can be, to touch my students and make things that make a difference for them. And I think that's why we teach. So I'm going to hand it off to Diane, maybe to discuss a little bit more about this, since she has a little more depth in this field than I do, to explain it a little bit as well. It's yours, Diane.
Well, I'm also not the only other woman on this meeting as well. I think Jodi might have something to say about that as well. But I want you, gentlemen, to imagine walking into a martial arts school, which is taught by 100% the instructors are women, right? And you walk in to check out this martial arts school, and are you going to have sort of an unconscious bias of, oh, I don't know if I want to train here. It's taught by all women, right? You know, so, but it's tough. I mean, we all offer something, right? You know, I've had my share of male students who've walked in, you know, first class on the mat and looked at me and said, wait, you're the instructor? You know, to which I answer, you know, absolutely I am. How can I help you? You know, and if they're not going to stay on the mat, that's their problem, not mine. But I had a last year a woman who came to the college course I taught who was Muslim. And so when she came in, she pulled me aside and said, you know, I'm not comfortable having, you know, a physical contact with a man at this time. And so fortunately I had there was myself and another male instructor, but I trained her for the first 6 weeks. And we had other female students that we could adapt and modify and have her train just with them. And then this magical thing happened after 6 weeks, and she came up to me and she said, I think I'm ready to work with the other male instructor. So, I mean, then that was just mind-blowing to me, that it just took time and it took exposure for her to say, I can do this. And then she eventually was ready to work with I mean, something that's very difficult for a woman who's raised Muslim, where there's strict rules about that. She was ready to do that. So it depends on the person, and you, as you all know, a good instructor can read the student and read their needs. And so it depends on the student. But I'm here to tell you that for a woman to walk in and see another woman teaching, there's the subconscious, she can do it, I can do it. I know when I began jujitsu at Northwestern University, it was taught by a male instructor. All his top brown belts were male, but there were a couple women in the class. And when I saw them doing techniques in a demonstration, that clicked it for me. That I see them do it, I can do it. Right. So I know that's difficult for male instructors, because how do I overcome that? I don't have any easy answers for that. But try to have a female student with you while you're teaching, because just even having another woman there, or even a girl there who's there to assist, will make a big difference in the psychological preparedness and openness of the women who take a course with you, would be my comment.
I do agree with Diane. I do agree wholeheartedly. I know from experience in most jujitsu classes through the PARS program, if we have one or two girls in a class of 12, 15, that's normal. I used to have a lady who had been in the program decades ago, and she came back, and she was kind of like mom, and she helped these girls become more comfortable in the class. She was a fairly aggressive lady, assertive lady herself, and that motivated them to stay in the class. I know with the junior high school program I had, one of the concerns by the administration was, are any girls going to want to be in your class? And because my kids knew me as a teacher, probably 1/3 of the students in my jujitsu classes were girls, because they felt comfortable with me. And the boys in the class developed a great deal of respect for these young ladies, because they saw that, gee, these girls can do these A, they're learning faster than we are, and B, they can do these techniques, and they tend to do them more efficiently. And they would work, they would have no qualms about working out with each other. And that was what I was after, is that, that the human body is a human body. And if we know what we're doing, they all work the same way. And these are all, how do you say, I don't know if you call them situational skills or not, but if you get enough, let me say this, I don't know whether it's valid or not. If you get enough women in your martial arts program, you will probably have a greater chance of getting more women in, because the word gets out, women are being treated on an equitable basis. Women are, all these things that the stuff he's teaching works for women, all these other things start to come into play, because there are enough women there to develop their own community and see the validity of what's going on. Am I making any sense, Diane?
When I began teaching at a college here in Chicago in 2016, there were no female students. Within 2 years, half our class was female, because word got out. We had one woman sign up because she saw me as an instructor, and then from there it just snowballed, because there was the psychological, oh wow, a woman's teaching this, a guy and a woman, this is great, and then once people came in and saw, it snowballed in for me. So for me personally,
yeah, for the 2 years I taught it at the junior jujitsu at the junior college, local junior college, before California had its budget cuts, and the head of the department came to me. He says, "We're going to have to let you go because you have the least seniority." He says, "But I really want you to know that your enrollment probably kept 2 or 3 other PE teachers employed." You know, it's kind of like, that's California law. So he says, "We're going to have to let you go." But probably half the kids in that program by the second year were women. And, you know, and a lot of it has to come, a lot of it comes down to the attitude that we as sensei express as sensei, and how we teach what we teach. You don't say to a lady or a girl, "You can't do this." You can say, "I'd like you to try it this way." You know, and one of the nice things about jujitsu is that there's very rarely is there only one way to do a technique. And there's nothing, I have no qualms about saying, well, you know, the guys may be doing this. I'd like you to try the technique this way, see if it works better for you. Because that's what you're after as a self-defense instructor anyway, or jujitsu instructor or martial arts instructor, is having the technique work for the student, not have the student learn this is the only way the technique can be done. And you have to mold yourself to fit that ability, because that's a great way to lose students in my book. You always have to, you know, you as a teacher or a sensei, you have to work with what comes in through the door. I'm not trying to say it negatively, but you have to work with what comes through the door. And sometimes what comes through the door may seem to be really unmanageable at first. But once you get to know that person, you find ways to work with them, and they will learn. And both of you will get satisfaction out of it.
I would also like to comment, I don't think that a curriculum in a martial arts program should be any different for women and men. The style of jujitsu that I practice, Miyamaru, when I went to test for black belt, I had to go learn some special female kata that was traditional in Japan. And I did it because I knew I needed to do it, because the founder said, you have to learn this and do it. I did it more out of respect for him. But, you know, I didn't believe that I should be doing anything differently than any of the guys. And once when I was in New York and doing a demo work for a demo that night, I went into one of our mugs, and I found out later, because my sensei in Chicago had never taught it to me the way they did it in New York, but the women in New York did it differently, you know, it wasn't a full throw. It was, off a rear grab. And I did it the way I was always taught it by my sensei in Chicago, which is all how the guys did it. I didn't do any differently than the guys. And so I went to do this technique, and they all were up in arms at me. Like, women aren't supposed to do it that way. Women can't do that technique. And I had just done that technique, right? I had just done it like I'd always been trained. So when you're trained that this is what you do and this is how you do it, then you do it, right? You learn. We all know that everyone has a spectrum of abilities and strengths. And I will never say to a woman, that's not a technique for a woman. Never. I would never say that to a man. I would always say, you know, try this one and see how it feels, or try it this way and see if that modification helps you be more comfortable in the throw, or you know, whatever. Or I always say to students, you know, you're going to find your favorite throw. You're going to find your favorite technique. The only way you do that is to try lots of different ways and lots of different techniques, and play around with it, and with different ukes, and you know, that's how you're going to find it. But to me, the way I built my program, there is no difference, and I would never have a difference for anyone. Try everything and see what works for you is kind of how I approach it. Because there are certain throws that someone who has less muscle mass is going to be better at. There's certain throws that, you know, someone who's of shorter stature is going to have an easier time doing. You know, very tall people might have certain kinds of issues with the hip type throws, they're better at sweeps and, taitoshi or whatever, so it's just a natural part of the diversity in people's bodies and abilities, the way I view it. So.
And one of the things I've learned, although I've mentioned it before, is that I've learned from my students, I've learned different ways of teaching techniques that actually work better than the way I was taught. And you're in order to do that, your students have to be comfortable with you. Just and some of the sometimes their terminology, you may be teaching the technique the same way, but their terminology is a better explanation of how to do a technique, although sometimes it can be a bit more blunt. More people can understand it, and so we can always learn from our students. I used to teach ukiyo-toshi, floating drop throw, one way, and then one day three of my purple belts, fourth cues, came to Sensei, we have a better way of teaching ukiyo-toshi. And it was, the students could get it down in 3 or 4 tries. It took a third person initially, but I said, duh. I had a student who came in one day with one of those hand exercise things, the spring thing. He was a Brahmin. I said, can I borrow your hand for a moment? Because him doing that gave me an idea. And that technique became what I use I even teach my students, but it's now a police come along, because it's so simple and effective to do, much more effective than what's called the koga come along. It's, I even had a call from someone who's at the federal level, an officer that since we became good friends. And he said, can you teach me this technique over the phone? And I said, sure. Do you have 2 hands? And I taught him how to do the come along. And he said, this is really cool. I'm going to have to spread the word. But anyway, it sometimes your students can be a good teaching resource if they become comfortable with you. And I think what Diane is saying, and where did Lisa go?
Yeah.
Oh, there you are, right in the middle. Yeah, what you've both said is that if your students are comfortable with you, they have a better chance of success. If they're confident in your skill level, or they can see it being done by another woman, they're more confident that they will have success. And this is what you're after success, because if a student can succeed in one thing, if they apply that same attitude, they can be successful at other things too. And not to go completely offline, but Jodi, what's your dog's name?
Her name is Maisie.
Lady?
Maisie.
Maisie? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Okay. Say hi to Maisie for us. Okay. Is there anything else we want to do with this topic? I know we've been on for almost
like Doris wants
2
to say
hours,
something.
but and we do need to get going here, but this has been a great discussion. Yes.
Doris Chamoun has patiently raised her hand for a while. I just want to, make sure that you saw that. Do you see your hand raised?
Hello, thank you. I just didn't want to interrupt before. I would like to introduce myself. First of all, I'm Doris Chamoun. I think you're all black belts here. I'm new, I'm 30Q still, but I am from Lebanon, and I currently work with Sensei Bshara Rai. He's the 3rd degree black belt in our country, and I am a psychologist as well. Now, mainly, I help him with his women's self-defense classes. And commenting back on the topic of whether women or men should be teaching this topic to women, I think, or actually, back to my psychology studies, humans are dynamic, so we cannot just take extremities or say men should be teaching women or women should be teaching women. We both teach women during classes, and it's working very good because we are making some live or real life scenarios and teaching NGOs real life scenarios against rape, where we both are needed to execute some some moves that are related to rape issues. So some women are more comfortable mirroring more with Bshara because he's male, and some women are more comfortable mirroring with me, and those women who are comfortable mirroring with him usually execute the technique efficiently more with him, not with me. So I really think it's important that both men and women train at the same time. So for example, a man and a woman senseis should be present at the same time at the self-defense session for women.
Doris, I
That's it.
completely
Thank
agree
you.
with you.
Yeah.
I feel like there are some unconscious biases both ways. And so for a new student coming in and seeing visually a female instructor being able to do a technique successfully, that helps them. I think Diane, you were talking to that earlier about that building that snowball effect of being able to see it successful. But then there's also the thought of a student, if they're only seeing women, of, oh, but this would never work on a man. So Doris, I wholeheartedly agree. I think it's crucial to have both. But also in addressing the question of which makes better instructors, male or female, I don't think we should forget the fact that while some people are very good at things and doing, and it is part of our training to teach, not everyone is a good teacher.
True, but this is not related to whether you're a woman or a man. It depends on how much you like being a teacher, I think, or how much you love what you're teaching. Before starting to teach Jiu-Jitsu, I never thought I would ever become a teacher of anything or any material or any session at all. I don't like teaching, but because I'm in love with Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, I teach it wholeheartedly. I never thought I would do that. So it depends on how much you love the material you're teaching and on how much you like teaching it. It doesn't depend if you're a man or a woman.
All right, Doris, I agree with you fully. I think, if you like what you are teaching, and you enjoy it, students will pick up on that. And if they pick up on that, you can do wonders with them. And that's the whole key to being a successful teacher, is to like what you're doing. I think that applies to any profession, or anything you do in life. If you enjoy what you're doing, you're going to do a better job of it, and people will pick up on that. And it's I've had to teach, fortunately, the schools I've taught at, I've usually been able to teach what I enjoy teaching. For me, teaching world history was, oh God, was tedious for me. I mean, it's just, are these 12 or 13-year-olds really going to benefit from knowing about ancient Greece and, all this other neat stuff? But when I got to what I referred to as U.S. mystery, the kids had a ball. And the same with government and economics. I enjoy teaching those. I enjoy teaching jujitsu. My last year teaching, we had for those of you that have been with me a long time, you probably heard this story before. At the high school I was at, we had some, let's say, cultural conflicts between different nationalities. and they were both using the same technique to attack each other, which was a roundhouse, a sucker punch from behind while kids were walking down the hallway. And so my 12th grader said, "Can you teach us what to do? This is an economics class. Can you teach us what to do to protect ourselves from this?" I said, "Well," I said, "I cannot show you a technique because that would get me in trouble. But I can show you the first part of it." And I said, "All you have to do, rather than if someone taps you on the shoulder, rather than just turning around and getting hit in the face, is take a step forward and then turn around." And I had both ethnicities in my classroom. And that stopped that assault within 2 days on the entire campus. Kids are not stupid. Students are not stupid. And if they see that you enjoy what you're doing and you're interested in their well-being, that's a great accomplishment for you as a teacher and a sensei. Because they know you're sincere and that you're looking out for them. And I don't think a student can ask for anything more. Anyway, do we have? We're well over 2 hours here. This has been an epic Zoom meeting. It will not be edited down. I don't edit down Zoom meetings. Is there anyone who'd like to make some closing comments or thoughts before? Okay, Lisa, you're first.
Yeah, so thank you for the discussion and thank you for the invitation to join this forum. I hope that all of the senseis here picked up some information that was helpful to you. I wanted to offer myself and my contact information. Maybe we can do that through you, sir. If you'd like to email me or if you have questions or want to continue this conversation further. There are also a couple of women's martial arts groups. So if you don't have any female instructors or senseis or self-defense folks, and you are looking to partner with a female, there's an organization called AWMAI. It's an Association of Women Martial Arts Instructors. They're available on Google to find out a little bit more about it. There's an organization called NWMAF, which is the National Women's Martial Arts Federation. Diane is a board member of that organization. And then PALMA, which is a smaller women's organization. I'm on that board, and we are offline right now for some reconstruction and redevelopment. But there are very competent women around. If you'd like to meet with somebody more one-on-one or exchange ideas, I know that there are other women martial artists who are very interested in speaking with you too, because this is an important topic. So I thank you all for being here, and I thank you for the invitation.
Can you send me the names of the organization and contact information, and I'll send that to everyone. I'll just put it out in my next Budoshin online newsletter. That way, okay. I can get to about 2,000 people.
Excellent.
I put my email in the chat. Please, anybody can reach out. My email's in the chat, and I put the acronyms for the Association of Women Martial Arts Instructors and NWMAF there as well. There's great resources on their web pages as well. Thank you for the opportunity and the education.
Oh, and we normally run Zoom meetings on the first and third Saturday of every month. You're more than welcome to join in. If you have any additional topics you'd like to have discussed, just send them to me. I add them to the list. We do need more topics because we are running out. And I don't want us to sit on Saturday morning and have us all just look at each other. So, anyone else have any closing comments or remarks? Okay, I want to thank Lisa and Diane and Doris and Jodi for joining us today. This Zoom discussion probably would have been radically different without you, and disappointingly different And I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us to share your perspectives and insights. And hopefully you'll be with us in some future discussions. And like I said before, if you think there's anything you'd like us to talk about pertaining to the martial arts, just throw the topics our way. If you have nothing else to do with your life, some week you can watch the previous 73 Zoom episodes. It also helps tremendously with insomnia. I'm being facetious. In any case, like I said, I want to thank you again. This is a great discussion, and see you now. This is the third Saturday in June. The first Saturday in July, there will not be a meeting because I'm having some surgery on the 28th. Hopefully it will go well, and I should still be around afterwards. But they were concerned that my blood pressure on Monday went up to 104. Top number was 149, and that was way off the board even for me. So we found out what the problem was. It was a medication issue that I accidentally doubled up on. And so now my top number is back down to about 115, 120, which is where it should be. But anyway, so I want to thank you for joining us again today, and hopefully some of you will be with us again the next time. So with that, hope you have a great remaining Saturday and Sunday, and have a good week. And Lisa and Diane, if you get that information to me, I will put it in the next Budoshin online. So it will get out there. So anyway, that's about it. So take care. Be good. Be kind.
Thank you all.
Make your students work hard. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.